Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Boy, do I have an interesting episode today, man. This guest that I'm bringing on today he's the Christmas gift that looks like a shoebox, and you think you're going to get the brand new pair of tennis shoes that you always wanted, only to find out that mom put something different in a shoebox for Christmas. Brett Figueroa, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing amazing. I'm really, really happy to be here. And thank you so much for having me on here today. It's always such a great pleasure and opportunity. And before I came onto the call, it's really like, what can I share? What's the value that can really be brought in today? So I'm just happy to be here. And if we have an opportunity to make a difference or an impact in any capacity, I'm really excited that we have this platform. So thank you.
Man, we're gonna make an impact. Let me introduce you as the international success trainer. Over 3,000 companies for Tony Robbins as his number one trainer. I think it's the dream and the vision that all of us want to have. And as we talked a little bit before, I've never done a pre-interview that went an hour and a half. I don't think I've ever laughed as much and really had a lot of serious moments during the conversation.
Yeah, really great time.
It was just so crazy. And I'm going to lead out one more sentence, and then I want to kind of get into your story, but.
Sure.
There's a picture of you that does circulate on the internet between Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins, two of arguably the greatest speakers in the world who kind of started this whole entire movement of motivational speaking.
Yeah.
Man, that's massive. Give us a little background into that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that picture. I think for me, I'm probably most excited because it's the only picture on the internet with Tony and Jim Rohn, and I'm the misfit guy that's, clutched into the middle, and so yeah, we were doing a sales rally. Tony was having an event in San Diego, and Jim Rohn was brought in as a guest speaker, and in the audience, and I was that particular event, I was being acknowledged as Tony's number one national trainer. And it was a lot of fun. And so because of that, and I broke all records, just blew him out of the water. I started, and we'll talk more about the backstory, but the increase was so quick and so fast in terms of business and production and sales and revenue. It was just really super, super cool. So I got acknowledged and said, hey, let's have dinner, all of us, me, Tony, and Jim together.
As we got to talking, I want to know more about you to bring something to our guests. And this is not a, let's pump up Tony Robbins type of podcast, but Tony Robbins has changed so many lives. Yeah, and then brings on guys like you that influence so many lives. But I want to go immediately to the story of how you became a part of the Tony Robbins situation.
So how I became part of the Tony Robbins situation is in my early 20s, I would listen to Personal Power, which was his original 30-day audio program that was developed in the late 80s, early 90s. And I was one of those guys, and I did it for pretty much most of my career. I would just be super redundant, and I would listen to it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And I was a broken down guy that showed up in Los Angeles with no job, no money, and I borrowed $50 to jump on a Greyhound bus out of my hometown of Sacramento. And so Tony was part of my radar, and through listening to Personal Power, it was awesome. I was in the mortgage business at the time, but I was really struggling. The market had shifted, and I lost everything. And one of my workmates goes, hey, Brett, someone's taking your car. Yeah, it's called the bank. They just take them. They don't even ask. So I'm watching my car disappear, and all of a sudden I've got no way to work, no way. And so I was living in a place called Encino, California. Encino's super nice, and it's really high end. And we were up the street from Michael Jackson's family where they grew up, and we lived in the hills. And I lived with my girlfriend's uncle, because my girlfriend had kicked me out of the house. Uncle Bob, we'll refer to him as Uncle Bob. And so Uncle Bob was one of my very, very first mentors. I never knew what money was. I just wasn't raised with money. I never knew what a nice car was. I had seen him at afar, but I'd never close in. And so as I was with this girl, Ellen, for 4 years, I had met Uncle Bob. And Uncle Bob is now, I think he'll be 85 in June. I met him at, I believe, age 50. We've had a long place. And so anyways, him and Uncle Bob and I went to Tony Robbins' event at the Western Bonaventure downtown to go see one of his one-day events titled Strategic Influence. And, you know, super pumped up, amazing day, like thousands of people. Like, it was my first real experience of Tony. That's just really, really cool. And I come home that night and back to my house with my girl that was her home, and I was living there. And she says, Brett, I need you to move, and I need you to move by tomorrow. And I'm like, whoa, okay, well, that's fast. I was like, can I get any buy time at all? Like anything? And she had her mom like show up, come in from out of town to make sure that my ass was out of her house. And so I left, and I just was struggling and scrapping and living in broken down hotels. And I just wasn't really sure what the hell I was going to do with my car or with my life. I had to get a car, and the only way I could get a car at that time was to go to a car rental place, and then as a vagrant, not pay my rental bill and just, you know, be on the run. So I got this vagrant rental car, you know, with no payments. And Uncle Bob decided, he says, hey, listen, he said, my wife and I are going through divorce, and they had been married for 30 years. And he said, why don't you come up and live at the house? I was like, okay, boom, done. I'm in. And Uncle Bob had the crib. Like, it was super, super the crib. And I was like, wow, this is like all of a sudden rock star status. And so, but I was still living there pretty much rent free. And Bob enjoyed my company, and I enjoyed Bob's company. We were both Geminis. We just chatted for hours, and we just had a great time and laughed. And it was super, super great time in my life. But I knew I needed to figure something out. So I ended up going to a seminar, and the seminar was called LifeSpring. And Uncle Bob had talked to me about LifeSpring. His niece, my girlfriend, Ellen, had talked about LifeSpring. His son, Paul, JP Newman, guy's probably worth 50 to 100 million, very successful. He's my age, he's 56. Just graduated out of UCLA. I'd never known anybody to graduate college. And so now I'm experiencing wealth and money, and Bob's children that super successful. And they just kept talking LifeSpring. And I'm like, it was a 3-day event, and I was told that was something that I really needed to do. And so I had $500 to my name at that time. And the event was downtown Los Angeles at the Garment District. And I paid the $395 tuition to go to the event. And that 3-day event titled LifeSpring transformed my every way of my life. And I cried relentlessly. Like, it was because they brought so much up about your history, your past, your upbringing, your mom, your dad. I mean, things that for the most part, if you come from a background like I did, you kind of want to just bury that stuff. Like, you don't want to have any association to it. And then there's got to be a level of forgiveness and a level of working through those issues. So LifeSpring for me was about that. And so I looked at my trainer. His name is Dan. And Dan was impeccable shirt, impeccable tie, impeccable slacks, like, he was just impeccable. And I would watch Dan from the front of the stage work with people that would have issues. And so then there would be these mic runners, and, you know, so somebody would raise their hand and a mic runner would come, and they would stand up in front of the whole group. And small groups, LifeSpring at that time, and kind of like Landmark Forum, if you're familiar with Landmark, very parallel. You know, a couple hundred people in the room and what have you. And so for me, I looked at Dan and I said, if I can do what Dan is doing, I said, man, my life is good. I said, I wasn't fulfilled in doing loans, doing mortgages. I wasn't fulfilled with that at all. There was a point where I thought, well, maybe I'll go into Hollywood and do some Hollywood stuff. And I thought, well, that's really not going to fulfill me either. And I really wanted something that was going to really impact lives. And as I went through LifeSpring and I saw how Dan did it from the front of the stage, it was amazing. And so I left out of there and I got really, really clear, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do with my life. Like, this looks super cool to do. And I recognized if you took that 200 group and then you put another 200 group and another 200 group until you went through the entire world, you'd really see how messed up people really are. Like there was really very few people that go, yeah, I didn't get anything out of this training. Like it really went so deep and so intense on your life that I recognized that the whole world needed to experience some type of a training in that capacity. So I left out of there. I started a company called Life by Design. And I remember I was on Sunset Boulevard. I was heading towards Malibu. And all of a sudden, boom, Life by Design. I was like, oh my God, so I had to pull over and like start writing down Life by Design. And I got to Malibu and I got to the restaurant I was going. I grabbed a cocktail napkin. I started writing this whole thing about Life by Design. And so I bought watches and hats and shirts and everything was Life by Design. I failed miserably. I didn't make a dime. I had no clue what the hell I was doing. Like I was like this guy that had this great, thing that he wanted to do, but I didn't have any guidance. I had no direction. Dan was like a great magician that would show you the magic, but didn't show you how they do the magic. So, I'm like, going, oh, I'm looking at Dan. Like, some people, my brother used to look at Hollywood people on television and you go, oh, I can do that. I'm like, no, you can't. That's why they get paid $10 and $20 million, bro. No, they just make it look easy. It's not easy. And so somebody said, well, because my life was so messed up, they're just like, well, you need to go to Tony Robbins' office and he could probably help you. And I took that literal, like, oh, okay, that's a really good idea. I'll go to Tony Robbins' office because it sounds like he can help me and he does this industry. And so I just decided that I would go to and show up unannounced to Tony Robbins' office.
Did you be like, man, I wonder if he's in today? I wonder if that's his car out there.
Yeah, it was just like, I go to the lady at the front desk, I'm like, yeah, I'm here to see Tony Robbins. Like, her eyes are like, what? You have an appointment? Like, what's that? Like, no, I just heard he can help me. And I'm hoping he's here that, help me. And, she looked at me like a whack job. And I said, well, do you mind if I sit down in the lobby here for, just a few minutes, like, at least?
Well, before you even go into that, did you feel like a whack job? I mean, because I would think, yeah, you're a whack job. This is Tony Robbins, right?
I recently just bought a plane ticket to Tyler Perry's office to leave on the 30th of June to take my book. And people, they really are clear with me. They're like, okay, he's not stupid. He's like super stupid. Like there's just no one that does that. And I didn't feel like a whack job. I just was like, I think I learned it through high school because, there would be like high school parties and people wouldn't invite me. So I would just show up to the parties. And they're like, well, you weren't invited. I'm like, well, I thought maybe you forgot. So I just had to show up. So, at Tony's office, people say, well, people are like, why'd you just show up to Tony's office? I said, because he didn't invite me. I said, if he would have invited me, I wouldn't have had to just show up. But so, I've just learned over my years that showing up is so important. And I know that one of the Hollywood principles of success is, I forget who said it, but it was like 90% of success in Hollywood, or pretty much probably anywhere, is really just showing up.
Man, how true.
I thought, let me just show up. If I get fired or if they, like, I did tell my friends, I said, well, listen, I'm going to get a fresh haircut. I'm going to get some new clothes. So when I go to Atlanta, if I do get arrested outside of the Tyler Perry gates, I said, I'll make the news. At least I'll look, I'll have some decent representation with nice clothes and a nice fresh haircut. So then I'll probably get shaved and stuff and clean. And
But you're sitting in his waiting room thinking that he forgot to send the invitation.
I'm just sitting there going, okay, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. They obviously aren't going to let me in with Tony Robbins. Got it. Okay, well, let me figure this one out and kind of retool my thinking. And all of a sudden I heard his voice. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not coming through the PA system. Like, he's here, like within proximity. And so as soon as I heard Tony's voice, I stood up in the lobby area and I went down to this particular, just a short bit of a distance hallway. And I saw him and his people coming at me. And I thought, wow, this is great. Like, success is coming at me. Like, I don't even have to walk in his direction. He's coming. I thought, wow, this is perfect. Of course, they're heading to the elevator. But I happen to be right there at the elevator as I see them coming. So I stick out my hand, and his hand is giant. For those who've ever met, he's like, it's like he grabs you, like you just sink literally into his hand. And we got in the elevator, and I just let him know how much of a difference and an impact he made on my life over the years through personal power and his event. And walked him out to his car, and I called one of my friends on the way home that day, and I said, I'm going to go to work with Tony Robbins. And so that was really my original. And that was a really hard it was a really hard move for me, because one, I meant leaving out of the mansion that I was living at in Encino, a really great lifestyle and all kinds, to now move 2.5 hours away with no car. I did ultimately give back the car that I was a vagrant, not paying anything on. I probably just dumped it off late one night outside the gates or something. I don't know. But they did bring me back in, to kind of make a long story short. They did bring me, and they said, okay, well, listen, we want you to come in. So there's a position that Tony has. It's called the FSR position. And so the FSR position is his elite of elite. So it's his trainers that travel the country 48 weeks out of the year. You're on the road, you live, you breathe, you sleep. You are working with a group of about 7 or 8 others. We're kind of like his Navy SEAL, just beasts that are out there. There was no higher position. I wanted that position. So they said, okay, well, let's bring this kid in and see what he's got. And so I remember going into the office, and it was a big big boardroom, and Tony's assistant, Deborah, she's just like this tall too. She sits at one end, and she goes, well, why don't you go down there? And she points me all the way down, like it was a football field, like, super long, giant office. And she said, well, go down there, use the flip chart, and give me a presentation like as if you were going to sell Tony Robbins. What would that look like? Sell me right now. And I'm like, oh my God, like talking about being under the gun and under the fire, and we're not having a model of reference for what that looked like. I left out of there, and they never called me back for months. It was like he's just terrifyingly horrible. And so I left out of there, and ultimately they called me back in maybe 2 or 3 months later. They said, we've got a job for you if you're interested. It's in the boiler room at $7.50 an hour. It's making calls, and it was calling companies for the FSRs that were on the road traveling the country. So if there was an event in Chicago, you basically went in the boiler room and called Chicago companies, real estate companies, mortgage companies, car dealerships, finance companies, you name it, we called them, to set up a free customized training by one of Tony Robbins' top tier trainers that are currently in that marketplace. And so companies would say either yay or nay, or whatever that was. So that was the last thing I wanted to do, because I wanted to be that trainer. And I showed up every day in a suit and tie. Most of the other people in there were just showing up. We were in San Diego, La Jolla area. They're showing up flip-flops, tank tops, and they're in the boiler room, just kind of like, okay, here's where I'm at. And I'm coming in with suit and tie. I mean, I'm ready to just do it. And so, so we started that, and it was really hard. I mean, just getting my ass to work, pardon my expression, but just getting there. My friend, I was not always, but I was told at some juncture of my life that if you're going to be poor, live with rich people, like, because you can't be poor and live with another poor person. Like, that's horrifying. It's like, do you got any money? No. Do you got any money? No. It's like, okay, how are we going to keep the lights on? Candles. How are we going to do this? So I moved in with my friend Baron, and I met Baron at 24. We're brothers to this day, even at 56 years old. And Baron was rich and did really, really well for himself. So I moved in with Baron. He used to drop me off downtown San Diego in his limousine. I'm in my suit, my tie, getting out of his limousine onto a bus stop. So I'm standing there with my briefcase, my suit and my tie, jumping into a bus, listening to Jim Rohn, listening to everything. That's all I did. That's all I did, was listen relentlessly to success tapes. I never listened to music, ever. Everything was all, let me get better. And so I just drilled for skill constantly. So I would take the 45-minute bus ride to the office. I'd work through the day. I'd the end of the day, I'd go back across the street to the mall. I'd jump into the bus. The bus would take me back downtown San Diego. I'd get out of the bus, jump into a train. The train would take me inland, and then I'd get out of the train and jump into a cab, and then the cab would bring me home for $7.50 an hour on a hope, a wish, and a prayer that I would ultimately do something with this company. And so it was a challenge to do that, but it was just part of, I think, it's just like earning your stripes, and, to do those things.
Did you ever feel like giving up?
I never did. No, I don't think it's just not my nature.
Right.
It's just not my nature. It's just not my nature. I think that for some people, part of their nature is, okay, if it doesn't work out, I'm out. That's just not part of my nature. And I'm really fortunate that I've raised 3 children. It's not part of their nature as well. They're full on. My son's an Eagle Scout. He's on his master's degree for math. He's the assistant to the professor. My other son's focused on going PGA Tour, and I'm just very fortunate that I didn't, have that as a model that said, well, yeah, if it doesn't work out, just quit. So just wasn't part of my nature to do that.
Which I'm guessing is also the same exact thing that started climbing you up that ladder.
Yeah. I think that, it's just, to me, it was just, you once you get hooked into something, I think it's learning how to retool it. Whether for me, it was really learning how to retool my emotions. Because did the emotions run high? Oh my God. God damn. Yeah. Emotions many times run super high. The thought of quitting that's just not part of my equation, but it's like, God dang it. Do I have to go through this burning fire? Do I have to go through this inferno? And from my experience, that's just part of the process. Got to go through whatever, on the hope, a wish, and a prayer that you were going to get to the other side. Well, obviously with no guarantees.
Already there's so many nuggets in here. It's crazy. And it's not, anytime you see somebody who's kind of made it to the top, you know that whatever they went through, they had that one more step. You mentioned Navy SEALs. We've done some of these guys. They just have that one more level that most people can't quite get to. But when did you finally bust into the big success with Robbins?
I just had such a terrifying, horrifying experience. They just watched me, and I know that because none of them, they ultimately said, okay, well, we need to get this kid out of our corporate office because he's way too much for us. We just need to get him out. So ultimately brought me in one day, and they said, okay, Brett, we're going to put you on the road with the FSRs in San Francisco. I thought, wow, that's great. I'm going to finally get an opportunity. They said, yeah, they're all out there right now, and, have at it. So I got a rental car. I drove from San Diego to San Francisco. I got in with the group. I watched meetings. I conducted meetings. And really, at the end of the day, the only reason they threw me out there was for a reason for them to fire me. Because they said, this guy's just horrifying. Let's just get him out. And the only way we can't get him out to just fire him for no reason, because we can't do that. But if we throw him out on the road with the Sharks for a couple of weeks, the guy's going to fail and we'll be able to fire him. And so I go out there for 2 weeks, and Tony comes in, does his event in downtown San Francisco. And they brought me into an adjacent room, my sales manager. And she said, well, Brett, we really like you. You're a good guy, but you're out. Boom, done. This is your final stop. San Francisco, thanks for being with us. Wow, okay. Gotcha. 2 weeks and I'm out. And I said, well, I didn't know how to process that. This is what I put my stake in, was to do this. Now they gave me the opportunity, and now they're pulling it from me within 2 weeks. I'm like, man, this is crazy. They said, well, here's the deal, bro. They said, well, our next seminar's in Los Angeles. And they said, if we can't tell you where you can live and not. They said, if you want to go to Los Angeles, back where you came from, they said, that's fine. And if you want to do things for Tony, we're not going to take care of you at all. We're not giving you a car. We're not giving you housing. We're not giving you money. We're not giving you appointments. We're not giving you anything, bro. But if you love Tony so much, boom, dude, have at it. And so I went back there and struggled my ass off. I had no car. I'm living nowhere. I went back to Uncle Bob's house, and the house was already full, so there was nowhere for me to live there. He says, I've got a boat, down in the marina. And, and he goes, you can live on the boat. And I remind, I tell people sometimes, because they think, oh, I'm like, there's yachts and there's boats, and this was not a yacht. This was a boat. And I'm 6'5", and I'm at the front end of this little tiny boat, and I'm waking up in the morning, and I'm going into the community showers where everybody else is heading out for their day to go out on their boats or their yachts. And I'm this guy coming in, and back in the days when I had hair and I had my blow dryer and my goody comb or brush, whatever. And I'm blow drying, putting on my suit, and the guys are all like in tank tops, flip flops, heading out for the day. And I would just go and say, okay, well, I'm going to make it. I'm going to figure out a way. And I would use payphones. I would start back in the days, right, when you could just pull off on the side of the road, grab a payphone. And so I would go to payphones, and there was a Ritz-Carlton not too far away there in Marina Del Rey, where I was living on a boat. I'd go to the Ritz-Carlton. I would lock myself into one of those glass booths. I would grab the phone book that was hanging by one of those metal, whatever, and I'm just banging calls, pulling literally dimes, just making calls and setting appointments. And, it's like, that was my phone booth. If I saw somebody, beelining into the direction of that phone booth, I'm like, dude, that's my phone booth, bro. That's my office. I know you need to talk to your mom, but that's my office. You need to go. And it was my office. And I'd set these appointments, and then I was like, okay, well, how am I going to get to these appointments? So I was back on the bus. And I would be the guy that's, in my suit and my tie, briefcase, standing at a bus stop, waiting for the bus. And bus would take me, many times it would take 2 hours, if not longer, on a hope, wish, and a prayer that the people that set the meeting, one, remembered it, and two, they were going to actually have an audience for you to speak to and pitch to. It was just hell. It was just, oh my gosh. Like, when I think back about just the journey that was, just to get to appointments, just to set the appointments. And so finally in Los Angeles, at the end, I ultimately did halfway decent. Nothing spectacular, but I did halfway decent. So we had a dinner with Tony at the Magic Castle and in Hollywood. That was super cool. And he's like, listen, dude, anybody that's willing to do what you just did, to sleep on a boat, take buses, make phone calls out of payphones, like do these crazy things. He's like, dude, you're a man after my own heart. You are welcome back onto our team. And it's like, oh, this is awesome. And so, I'd get all the perks back, get the car, get the housing, live with the team, get to meal break, do all the fun stuff with, the guys. And I got to a point, and I share this with people because I find that it's many times a common denominator in the pursuit of success, where because of our sense of unworthiness as a person, for whatever that is, somebody said something, mom, dad, whatever, just have this sense. And so I found myself succeeding. And then all of a sudden I found myself doing everything almost in the opposite direction. So it's like, I'll talk many times about, in a relationship, when we get together with somebody, we're so amazing or so awesome. It's like, here, let me open the door for you, honey. And, get them flowers. And then all of a sudden it's like, dude, you see the door? That's your door. You can open it. Right? All the things that got us into that great marriage are the exact same things that we quit doing. And so I found myself doing that. And so to wrap up this part of the story, it was December 15th. And you asked me, like, where'd the trajectory shift? And the trajectory shifted for me on December 15th, 1996. And the reason I remember that date was at 9:10 a.m. is that that particular day, all the teammates and the company were going to Tony's house in La Jolla for his Christmas party. And I was being rerouted back to the corporate office, which is right within the vicinity, for a sales meeting with my sales manager. And I'm not really sure why or what. I thought I was on good behavior. I thought things were being halfway well. And I walk into my sales manager's office, and on the desk are pink papers. And so I get this whole thing. We love you and you're awesome. And the whole, right before they just cut, your neck off, and today you're fired. we're going to fire you officially. Here's the papers we've got written up for you. And so that was really a defining day for me. As I sat and I walked in and I see pink papers, I'm like, oh, this is the real thing. And so I sat there and I recognized I had one of two choices. And that was to either step up or step aside. And I knew that stepping aside wasn't part of the equation for me. That just wasn't going to happen, because I knew that I felt destined for this body of work, what it is that I do to this day now, almost 3 decades later. And so I knew that stepping aside wasn't, but I also knew that if I was going to step up, I knew that, man, okay, Brett, this was going to be, if you were going to do it, you got to goddamn do it. And I stood up from this woman's desk and I said, you can't fire me. And I said, I'm not leaving this office. And I said, it ain't going to happen. I said, I ain't signing those papers. You can't fire me. I said, you'll need to call security because I ain't going. It's like, what? They're in the corporate office. They're used to people coming in, signing stuff and heading out the back door. They're not looking for a debate, right? Just a signature. Let's get you out. And I'm giving her a whole, and I said, you just give me one more shot. Give me one more chance. Give me one more opportunity. I said, and I sold the dream like there was no tomorrow in that moment. Because I knew that if she hit final, that boom, you're out. I'm like, oh my God, where do I don't even know where to go. Like Uncle Bob's house is still like, I'm lost. Like I'm literally like just homeless. So I'm selling myself hard to know. And so she said, okay, we'll give you one more opportunity. So I showed up to Tony's house that day. He answers the front door like, what? How? What? My team was supposed to fire you and let you go.
He's like, bro, I have fired you 3 times already.
Yeah, how many times is this guy? And so finally, what Tony really got out of that was that, okay, if he had the chutzpah to get through my management team, through my executive core trained, sharpshooters, if Brett can get through them, he can get through the average man or woman on the street. And so he gave me that shot, and I started to really just take control of myself, take control of my emotions, take control of my behaviors, take control of my patterns, my behavioral patterns, my emotional patterns. And I started to take control, and I started taking my income from 3,000 to 5,000 to 7,000, 10,000. I got to where I was making $10,000 on a check, and I thought, wow, this is super, super cool. Like I'd never made that much money. Well, I guess maybe when I was doing mortgages, I'd have periodic bouts of, a nice check, but many years had passed by. And then I said, I wonder what I could do. And I use the example now. I didn't know the metaphor back then, but the metaphor and example I use now is it's kind of like if I take the Ferrari out of the neighborhood, and I take it to the desert, then I can really see what's under the hood, right? I can't see what's under the hood of the Ferrari in the neighborhood. There's just no way, right? Start taking down things, lots of things. So I thought, what can I do if I really just throw this thing out? And so my very next check, I made over $100,000 on my very next check. The whole company was like, what the hell? This is the kid that we kept firing. He's the dude that was on buses and trains and cabs that we just kept looking for reasons to fire him. And now the guy breaks every record, every income record, every sales record. So Tony just had this unbelievable amount of respect for, that level of effort. And so that was, taking a kind of a long, many-year story, but that was the real shift is December 15th, 1996 at 9:10 a.m. because I just got to a place where I think that people have got to get to, where you just go, that's it, no more, enough's enough. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. If I'm going to do this thing, I don't care if it's going to Hollywood. I don't care if it's being in professional sports. I think that people have got to ultimately, get to a place with themselves where, and I knew that I needed that. I needed to go, okay, dude, if you're going to do this, you got to do it right. You gotta be all in. And I needed to be all in. And I see for a lot of people, they're just really not all in. They're kind of somewhat sort of in, whether it's a relationship or business or a project. They're kind of sort of in. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, great. With all these other options and variables, as a backup. And I'm not that guy.
Well, I know you're not that guy, obviously. This is why I enjoyed our conversation so much when we were kind of doing the pre-interview stuff. But so I think I totally resonate with everything that you've said, and I also think other people are going to resonate with this because this is just such an incredible message. And fired 3 times, being as crazy as you are, going through the living hell, not to mention being 6'5", you can't really hide.
No.
Yeah, you're not a dude going into a crowd and just kind of mixing in. So if you honor us with it, I will do the part 2. I have to. Let me restate that. Get a date for me to redo part 2. I can't let this go. And I appreciate you so much for coming on this show and telling us this. And on part 2, we're going to really pound away at your books and everything else that you've done. But man, your story is just wickedly inspiring.
I really appreciate that. And I'll go with that, the inspiring word, because I was mentioning something which the book Triumphant is designed to really to inspire somebody. Like, that word is the word of choice, is to inspire. Yeah. So this is a memoir. The book Triumphant is a memoir, and it's basically encompasses my life. And the outcome of that, and the outcome of the book is what you just said, and that is to inspire.
Well, it's going to be awesome. I know that. So thank you again so much for coming on the show. I'll be in contact with you, and we'll get it set up.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Mitch, for having me on, okay?
All right, my brother. I appreciate it.
Okay.